Welcome to the 2022 International Business Case Competition Finals. My name is Elena Salsitz. I've been teaching in the International Business Department here at San Diego State for 15 years. This is my 16th year. And this is our 6th competition of the case competition here at San Diego State. This week we have welcomed outstanding teams from 8 universities across the country, including University of Washington, Tecnológico de Monterrey, Michigan State, Texas Christian, University of Oklahoma, University of Tennessee, Cal Poly Pomona, and Bloomsburg University. This afternoon, 4 of those teams will compete in the finals. Before we go further, I would like to recognize some important people in the audience. Dr. Mark Wheeler, the International Business Department Director, right down here. And Mark Ballum, who is the Managing Director of the Wendy Gillespie Center for Advancing Global Business. Mark and the center have been loyal supporters of the case competition. And our judges from this morning, Hilda Mwangi, Eric Graves, Ken Cohen, and Valerie Alexandra, who I don't believe could be here. And then our esteemed judges for this afternoon's finals, William Perkins, Vice President of Endeavor Bank, Jared Inez, Senior Vice President of Bank of America, and Dr. Dwarka Chakravarty, Management Professor here at San Diego State. Thank you all of you, for giving us today your time and expertise. So let's get on to the competition. 4 of these teams, as I said, are advancing to today's final. Each team will have a 15-minute presentation, followed by questions from the judges and answers from them. Our moderator, Maribel Franco, will make sure that everybody stays on time, and all guests are asked to remain seated during the presentation. So let's get started with our finals, and welcome to the stage our first team, Team Maya.
Hello there. So last night, as we're preparing for this amazing presentation we're about to give you, working for 24 hours straight, we're about ready to send it over 60 seconds before the deadline, and the file is too large. It won't send. We try with Microsoft, we try with Google, we're afraid we're gonna miss the deadline. Oh, if there was only an easier way to handle my data and send big files. Oh wait, that's what today's presentation is about, the amazing Dropbox. And overall, you're going to see while, even though Dropbox is not a differentiator in cost leadership, it does deliver on its quality and reliability for its customers. A couple things. Oh, first, hello, my name is Alexandra, joined by Peyton, Ainsley, and Nathan. We are so excited to give this presentation to Dropbox today as your consultants. And you may hear me using the word we, but that's just because I think we're all on the same team here for this presentation. So you asked us to do a couple things looking at Dropbox's future. Should we go global? Do we stick on business to business versus business to consumer? What markets are we going into, etc. And we came up with 3 key recommendations for Dropbox today. The first one of being on focusing on business to business, still keeping business to consumer, but expanding into business to business markets through a couple strategic partnerships we'll touch on. Number 2 is leveraging that cloud infrastructure that we are so well known for. Again, more on that later. And third is utilizing what we're calling virtual first. This really deals with taking care of our employees and our talent and expanding in that realm as well. And so before we get into all this amazing information, I want to really stress, why are we doing all of this? Because Dropbox is already successful, but if we do not continue to expand, number 1, our market share will continue to drop as it already has, and we do not want that. Number 2, the international market will be stagnant. You'll see later that Google and Microsoft are not in international markets, so we want to capture those first. Number 3, businesses will not adopt us. We're thinking retail, hospitality, all these different industries. We want to become well known with them. And number 4, market irrelevancy. Of course, the technology industry is changing all the time. and we want to expand in order to keep up. And so Nathan now is going to talk about, again, some of our competitors just because the market is very lucrative. So I'll pass it off to him.
Yeah. So, I mean, with our analysis, we're going to start here with just kind of a competitive landscape and what things look like. Currently, our main competitors are Google Drive and Microsoft OneDrive. And, these competitors have resources in terms of money and, I guess how large they are that we don't have as Dropbox. So we're not really trying to compete on that front. We're trying to differentiate in a way and find our competitive advantage elsewhere. And this is really through strategic partnerships, our focus on international versus their focus on domestic, and our focus on business to business. So, kind of what our value proposition is it hits kind of a few key things. First, our features. We offer a wide variety of features, and we might not offer a G Suite or a Microsoft Office, product line, but we offer other, comparable, services that are going to be useful and kind of incentivize the use of our product. On top of that, we kind of differentiate with our speed. That's kind of one of our big selling points is we have SmartSync, which allows us to be faster than our competitive in our upload speeds. And then, this all leads to satisfying our financial and just kind of operational objectives and, working to achieve those goals. And then, of course, we have a strong infrastructure and supply chain, and we're going to be focusing on that a little bit more later and how we're utilizing that infrastructure to, expand quickly and, take a dominant international market share. So here's kind of an overview of the entire cloud storage market. I'll start up here. It's about a $70 billion market with a 25% compound annual growth rate. So we're looking at an extremely high growth rate market. And because it's extremely high growth rate, you have countries or regions like the Asia Pacific region and the European regions that are seeing medium to high growth. And there's tons of potential for growth here. And more specifically, since COVID, we're seeing a lot of growth within businesses using cloud technologies as they expand their offerings. As Dropbox specifically looks like is $2.1 billion in revenue with about 600 million business to consumer users with about a 2.5% conversion rate to 15 million paying business to consumer users. But what we're really trying to hit on is that number of business teams, which is 500,000 using our product. We really want to expand that exponentially and really reach into that market and take advantage of it.
Thank you, Nathan, for that information. So if we're going to be looking at the business-to-business kind of strategy, we want to make sure we know what the businesses want and what they want from Dropbox. And so we kind of have 4 key points that I have laid out here. So the first is going to be data security, which Dropbox does a great job delivering on with our SSO login, as well as other data security packages that we provide. The second is going to be staying up to date with data regulatory standards. So, for example, we have our HIPAA certification, which now allows us to go into the hospital industry, which is going to be really important. The third thing is going to be the administrative oversight. And so Dropbox does a great job with having file encryptions and passwords and just great managerial, from a managerial side, offerings in that field as well. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is we want to make sure that we are very compatible with Microsoft OneDrive and Google Drive, because again, the vast majority of these companies are going to be using those services, and so we have to make sure that we're integrating. So now I'm going to kind of hit on why we're doing the international expansion, which is going to be largely because of that untapped market space. So as Nathan was talking about earlier, there's $70 billion in the cloud infrastructure market, cloud storage market. And of that, though, 49% of it is actually international. So as you can see by this data up here, OneDrive and Google Drive both predominantly focus on the North American side of it. And so Google Drive, for example, has 73% of its users being actually from the United States. So it's a lot of untapped area right there. And then we also wanted you to know that 293% is the growth rate projected for 2027 in this industry from the international standpoint. So it's really important. We have some alternative solutions up here for you listed. We ultimately decided through risk mitigation, though, and financial feasibility that these options weren't going to be in our best interest, and that we think our current strategy is actually going to be much better and generate more revenue with lower risks. So I'm going to pass it on now to Peyton to talk about timeline and implementation.
Thank you, Ainsley. So to start, this is going to be a really large overview of our implementation. We're focusing over the course of 5 years, and when we start, there's three main things you want to focus on. Obviously, those being our recommendations. So the first thing is finding the talent that we want. The second thing is going to be actually focusing on building out that cloud infrastructure through point of presence or leasing data centers. And the third is going to be partnering with specific cloud service infrastructures. So obviously where we are right now, we want to start identifying those key partnerships. And hopefully by the end of this year, going into next year, we'll be able to announce those key partnerships. So next, we're going to keep sourcing that talent and whatnot, and on top of that, keep forming those strategic partnerships. But now we're really going to touch on our point of presence, so actually meeting the demand that we've set out through our other two strategies. So 2023, 2024, and 2025, each year, we're going to implement at least two new point of presence data centers. And then going into 2026 and 2027, we're going to uptick that to meet the demand and whatnot, and actually go for 3 per year. In total, our investment is going to look like something like $740 million for everything that we've laid out. Our ROI over the course of 5 years is going to be about 250%, and finally, our break even is going to be in about 2.5 years. So that's a very large overview, but I hope it gives you a good picture of kind of where we're headed for the next 5 years. Next, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Alexandra, talk a little bit more about strategic partnerships.
Okay, thank you, Peyton. So I know that was a lot. That was our entire plan. I want to bring you back to our very first recommendation, which was those strategic partnerships, because of course, even though we expand, if there's nobody who wants to partner with us, there's really no point. And of course, the relevancy is kind of how I talked before about breaking into different industries. We want to diversify our partnerships because as industries flux, we want to remain profitable and really make ourselves seem as an integrated company as a whole that doesn't just focus on one market, but just data integration for everyone. And so we have 3 main industries we're going to look into. The first one being enterprise resource planning companies. They deal with huge amounts of data, and integration is key, especially when transferring that data onto the cloud. They want to make sure it's safe and protected. Oracle is just one example of this. And then number 2 is going to be higher education institutions. If you've ever used Canvas, this is an example of something that needs to be integrated. I'm sure that you 3 executives right here deal with many emails every single day. Transferring all of those onto the cloud is another example of how higher education universities could use Dropbox. And then the last one is simply retail companies. Again, we touched on post-COVID, people are moving things online, and retail companies like Zara really see the value in having all of their data on the cloud, so you can utilize features such as seeing real-time stock levels, inventory levels, et cetera, if everyone is putting their data onto the cloud. And so these are just 3 examples of different industries we would seek partnerships with. And given that we have these partnerships, Ainsley is now going to talk about our infrastructure to make it happen.
Yeah, so our second implementation strategy is going to be on this infrastructure expansion, which we see as important because, I mean, as a globe, we're becoming more interconnected. Globalization is huge right now, and we want to make sure we're tapping into that international market space. So what we have here is, I know we briefly talked about the point of presence that we're going to have. We're going to implement 12 new points of presence internationally, so that way we can utilize those servers on an international level. We've also chosen a few countries that you can see up here that we're planning on expanding into, and those we chose based off of their GDP, their internet usage, as well as their broadband capabilities. And so we definitely wanted to explore international industries as well as strategic analysis or alliances within that space, while also capitalizing and pushing more on our already locations in Japan, Australia, Germany, and France. How we're going to do that is with our POPs, the cost breakdown is shown up here for you guys, and it's going to be $30,000 per petabyte per month for the lease, but as you can see, the cost is marginal compared to the projected revenue. I'm not going to pass it on to Peyton to talk a little bit about virtual first.
Thank you, Ainsley. So next, talking about virtual first, this is actually how we're going to, kind of court that talent, which makes tech companies so impactful and so, I guess, successful. So why does this matter? Well, we're really targeting our sales force. And when it comes down to that, that's how we're going to drive our business-to-business demand, is through those deals and those business relationships. So all that to say, there's 4 main things we're kind of focusing on for actually courting the talent. So the first is going to be actual searching and finding that top talent. Next is actually be compensating them well. So that's a big thing. People like to get paid. And then next is virtual first. That's virtual workers. It also helps our costs go down. But we can, instead of just having an office in Tokyo, now we can hire from anywhere in Japan to find that top talent. And then finally, actually training and preparing our workforce. So this is kind of overall what the cost is going to be, but it's still going to drive that revenue. So over the course of the 4 years, the total uptick is going to be about $140 million. But as we look to 2027, so the end of our plan, the Salesforce salary increase, those costs are going to be about $50 million. So next, I'm going to pass off to Nathan to talk a little bit more about some risk we could see.
Thank you. So, we've kind of highlighted some of the main risks we saw with our implementation plan, those being, financial, competitive, legal, and of course, operational risks. The main one I want to point out here is the actual legal risks that are associated with this. As you guys know, data privacy is a big concern between businesses and consumers. And, with that data privacy, we hold a lot of responsibility with the data that we hold. So it's important for us to, prioritize in our implementation, especially while looking internationally, on a focus on data security and data privacy. Here's kind of a overall business growth and financial look at our company. We're looking at about a 5% continued growth of business to consumer, as we're not prioritizing this growth, but a 25% growth annually on the business to business users. And this will lead from about 6.3 to 19.1 million, or about a 14 million increase in number of business-to-business users. And then on top of that, you can see we'll have an increase of about 248 million is our current profit right now, to about 548 million. And you can see how it scales here on this graph. And then our revenue share will go from about 25% of our business being business to business to about 46% of that being business to business. And so that's all. We're focused on business to business and international expansion, and we'd love to answer any questions that you have for us.
Sure. So you said you wanted to focus on the B2B segment of the marketplace, right? So what do you suggest they do in the business to consumer segment? Nothing? Status quo, profit? What's the plan?
Yeah, so within that market, we're looking to maintain the status quo, maintain what we're currently doing, because it's not a real opportunity for high growth, and we're not really driving that growth anyways, because it's kind of driven by the consumers themselves. So we're going to let that market, stay as it is, and we see more profitability on the business-to-business side.
Well, great job, guys, by the way. So maybe talk a little bit more about your thoughts on the pricing strategy for the enterprise sales, and I'd also love to see if you have any thoughts on how you would compensate your sales force. Would it be heavily light on commission, or do you think a salary and bonus would be better as far as getting the sales force motivated to make these enterprise sales?
Yeah, so I can go ahead and touch on Salesforce. So I think with a lot of compensation, I think you got to think about it the way tech does. So it's kind of like a pretty, well, I will say a pretty strong base pay, but a lot of it is driven by how performance does with the company. So I would say, say like a 50% increase on top of base, focusing on, how well they actually do. Like you said, can't think of the word, but I guess revenues that they bring in. Yeah.
If you can open slide 15, we actually have a kind of outline of what, So on here, it kind of shows, just like the Salesforce growth, like salary per employee is in this figure as well, which we're starting with about a base of 110,000, which is what we found to be kind of standard in the industry, and then just kind of adjusting for increases throughout there.
So that's base, or is that all in salary, 100?
Sorry, average all, not average base. I misspoke.
So back on that slide, because I echo the gentleman's comments, you did a good job.
based off US.
US? So if you're trying to expand B2B, I would assume that sales folks are gonna be more effective if they're actually in Japan. So you're willing to pay a differential wage US, is that kind of the incentive for being joining the sales force? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
So as you look to expand outside of the US, right, is within the B2B segment, broadly the two sub-segments. One is the small and medium enterprises, and the other is the enterprise class segment. So where would you focus, where would your sales force be focused on? Where would you expect to see the revenues coming from?
So we did some research on how Dropbox actually gains its memberships, and you can see through this curve here, you have a visitor because we do have our freemium model. And so this is where the business to consumer comes in. For example, you work for a large corporation, but you use Dropbox for your personal email. And then slowly you realize how great Dropbox is, and you start using it at work, and then you realize you're not allowed to use this at work, and eventually more people start using it, and maybe even one day the whole company adopts it. We saw this was a very common trend, was that people were using it at work, and it turned into the entire company using it. So I hope this answers your question of how we don't really have to put much marketing into the business to consumer side. It naturally leads to business to business.
My question, sorry, I should make it more clear. The two subclasses within the business-to-business market, right? One of them is the small to medium enterprise segment, which is 50 employees or less. The other is the larger enterprises. Right? So when you expand internationally, where's your focus going to be? What are you going to target your sales force to do? Are you going to have different sales teams addressing the small and medium enterprises versus the larger enterprises?
Okay, yes, I see now.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you mean, for example, we had retail companies versus, an ERP system, small, medium businesses, and then large businesses.
Corner store versus Walmart.
Yeah.
So on that front, like in terms of small to large businesses, Microsoft actually is generally more focused on enterprises and kind of hits that part of the segment, and they're a lot more competitive, especially because of their service offerings on that front. So we're actually looking to target more of the middle to smaller size companies, because we see Google's still a lot more centralized in the US when it comes to business, and Microsoft's expanding a little more internationally than they are. So based on that, we're going to target the medium to small businesses, as it'll be like a less competitive and less harder to or easier to enter market versus trying to compete against Microsoft with Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint and those resources that they link with their source as well.
So you mentioned you want to enter into some new strategic partnerships. What would be your pitch to those potential strategic partners if they say, well, why don't we just do this with Google? Like, explain to me why we should enter into this very impactful partnership that could be hard to untangle with Dropbox. What would you say would be a good response to that question?
So Dropbox is the first company to actually use what's called shingled magnetic recording drives. And I'm sure Google and Microsoft have a ton of capacity that they're building on. But this is technology that really allows businesses to not keep hitting dead ends in terms of their capacity. It basically, by shingling the technology, you're allowed more capacity. And so this is one offering that just makes it easier for them. And the second part of this is that Google and Microsoft, we don't really see them as being so much of a consultant for companies who look to see the integration process through. They provide the software, but we really see Dropbox as a service and not a product. And so we're, again, like Nathan said, maybe focusing more on small and medium businesses who want to see this integration through, because there is a 75% fail rate of integration when moving onto the cloud.
Thank you.
So another question, sorry, your name, you mentioned.
Ainsley.
Ainsley?
Yes.
Thank you.
That you made a comment about, you made a decision to go this route because of the financial implications of the alternatives. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Like in terms of international expansion?
Yeah, you said we made a decision because we looked at the alternatives, but the financial burden was much higher. And so expand on that. What
So here's our alternatives here. We saw just the profitability, I think I kind of hit on in the analysis slide, of the international markets relative to kind of continuing domestically. And so we really noticed that, again, Google and Microsoft took up such a large market share from a domestic standpoint that necessarily isn't shown internationally. And so we wanted to make sure that we were getting as much revenue as possible. And so in the domestic expansion process, it would be really hard to compete with such already greatly established companies.
So I want to compliment you on not only having the polished presentations, but having the detail in the appendix, and just switching back and forth seamlessly. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question on your slide with respect to partnerships. If you could put that slide up. The one which had ERP and institutions and retail.
It's 11.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I jinxed you with that comment.
I'm sorry. I got nervous.
So my question was, if I look at enterprise resource systems, I say, okay, I understand SAP, Oracle, maybe they could be strategic partners, but aren't the other two just customers in their different industries? Aren't they customers? So why would we consider them partners? Why would they be strategic partners?
We mainly see them as just that entrance into new markets. Again, it will mostly be the employees of a company like Zara, not necessarily a consumer at Zara. So that's a very good point. But we still see them as partnerships, hoping that, again, they'll keep us on for long-term partnerships and contracts and stuff such as that. We want to see the integration through, not just sell them the product.
And on top of that, with higher education institutes, for example, like the partnership is more focused on we don't have specific companies, but we mentioned like an example was Canvas. We're looking to partner with resources that use a ton of data like Canvas, and that and through that integration, kind of seeping into the other parts of the institution, so that we become an essential part of their operations, and we're almost essential to what they operate in. And then once we're essential in what they operate in as well, it becomes ingrained in the people who are going through these institutions, and it kind of carries through and paves the way for them to be looking to use this in the future as well.
Another question, what do you think, what is the sales cycle going to look like for getting these new contracts? Is it in terms of time frame? So in my business, my sales cycle is up to 2 years. So what does the sales cycle look like? Because B2B is so incredibly important.
Yeah, so I'd say the sales cycle more looks like we partner strategically with like an Oracle. Because they're using now Dropbox as part of Oracle, they realize that they like it. I mean, it's part of their program now. So, now they kind of have this more, just free model, like we said, freemium. They're kind of switch over. If you're looking for like a time, I would say about a year and a half.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question or a comment, right? But I think, what do you think? Do you think that Dropbox can differentiate itself enough in the enterprise segment, the large enterprises, in terms of its security, right? In terms of its customer service and support, to compete head on with Google and Microsoft? Yeah.
We think
Because, I heard from what you said there that, well, we're looking to stay away from head-on competition. But is there an option for competing with them, taking market share away from them, right? What do you think?
We think from an international standpoint, it is. Again, domestically, they already hold so much of our market. But then what differentiates us is, again, our cloud storage and sharing things. We have a better administrative setup, I would say, from a managerial perspective from that. We also can share larger files, as we kind of started with our presentation, as well as just our customer service. We did kind of the research into that. It's 24/7, it's to a higher level. So we think that if we really start from an international field now and get a head start compared to Google and Microsoft, I think we've done a lot to try to keep up with them domestically, but I think from the international market, we would do a better job.
And I'll add to that, in terms of business to business, whenever you have, a business integrates any kind of system, it's almost impossible for them to unintegrate that system. So if we're the first to the market and we get a foothold with a lot of these businesses in the small business market, it's going to be extremely difficult for them to go like, okay, we want to change to Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive. It won't make practical sense because it's such a hassle, it's such a financial implication on that, on that front as well.
Yeah, switching costs are high. Yeah.
So you guys have really focused on the B2B sales. I want to go back to the B2C. So early on in your presentation, you mentioned just maintaining the status quo, but competitors are still trying to gain market share in B2C. So do you think just doing what Dropbox is doing now is enough to maintain market share? Or do you think something needs to be a strategic shift in order just to maintain market share, given that competitors are trying to advance and gain market share in the B2C space?
With B2C, you can see that Dropbox is the only one that's free. And so we think that people who are working for corporations who have that bigger amount of data might do that. But for people such as students or, I don't know, just everyday people who don't have that much data, there's really no reason why they wouldn't choose Dropbox unless they want to start paying. So again, our freemium strategy really is how we're planning on keeping those customers with little to no costs of advertising, which is why it's kind of the best of both worlds. You know, we don't have to completely liquidate this part of our business, but we still get those customers who may even lead into potential business-to-business customers. And we'd be happy to give any more clarification if you had needed further explanation of that.
That was good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.